Okay, we are now live with David Davies from AgUnity. Welcome, David. Lovely to have you on board.
Good morning, Joana. Thank you.
Welcome to SaaS Stories. So first question, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, so I grew up in a remote wheat and sheep farming area in South Australia, sort of up near the Victoria and New South Wales border. But I spent all my life working in technology and right around the world. So, from Hong Kong, and then I worked in UK for a while, and then I found the opportunity to work on a UNESCO project or actually propose a project to UNESCO, which they funded. And I spent a year traveling around West Africa in 96, 97, and then ended up in Japan, where I had a company of my own that got acquired by NASDAQ company. And then I found my way into big banking. So I worked at Goldman Sachs and then Lehman Brothers for the crash, which was quite exciting, particularly because I was running treasury technology for all over Asia. So we were basically holding the money when the music stopped. And then I was a global head at Standard Chartered, and I had another company which got acquired, and that sort of led to how we started AgUnity.
Wow, quite the story there. You're certainly a man of the world, and now you're somewhere where you're saving the world. So with that in mind, tell me the story of how you came up with the idea for AgUnity.
Well, it's a great story because it was really an accident.
They always are, aren't they?
Yeah, they used to. It doesn't happen. You don't. Things like this don't happen when you plan them. So we, as I mentioned, we had a company in Singapore, and John Freeman, who's one of the founders of AgUnity, he was the legal counsel internal legal counsel in that company. That had got acquired, and we were working on some other banking technology, like back. I won't get into the details, but sort of competing with the back end of Bloomberg and Reuters. And we got invited to a conference in London, and it was Fintech for Good conference that was relevant to what we were doing at the time. I couldn't go, so I sent John along, and he's rolled up direct off a flight from China, and pulling his bag along to get his pass on the Friday before the event started the next week, and he found out there was a hackathon on the weekend. And so he's entered the hackathon because he loves them. He's actually been involved with a couple of others previously. And he calls me up. I was in Australia at the time. And he says, look, there's this really great hackathon, and there's a prize from Singularity University. And for anyone who doesn't know, Singularity is like a think tank in California. And they're the same people that are behind the X Prize, Peter Diamandis, Ray Kurzweil. So they like to do moonshot stuff. And one of the things they say is, don't try to do a project for 1 million people if you can do it for 1 billion. Think big, go, shoot for the moon. And so John and I were talking, we said, look, it has to be something really big. So and it was Fintech, financial technology for good. So we tried to come up with an idea or a way that we could influence the very lowest income farmers in the world. So the 1 billion poorest people in the world, what were they lacking? What was their main problem? So fortunately, we had a bit of background in this. The company that I'd had in Japan, which got acquired back in 94, 95, something like that, that worked on the very early mobile technology. So Japan had iMode phones, which were, Docomo had beat the world to that one. And so we built a technology that connected those to networks, and we did a few things there. So we knew about this sort of how mobile phone or web browsing mobile phones can change things. We'd had experience from working with farmers cooperatives from where I grew up and how they work in a developed country. And then we had seen firsthand, John had spent a lot of time in developed markets as well, what happens in a developing country when really the fundamental impediment to most farmers is they don't trust and cooperate with each other the way we do in a developed market. And a lot of that just comes down to simple record keeping. Like if I'm a farmer, I'm not going to hand you my cocoa beans or coffee if you're the buyer unless you're paying me cash on the spot. And in developing markets, you might not always have cash, or you're not prepared for the amount that's brought in. And so what was happening in places like Papua New Guinea, you see farmers that would harvest cocoa beans and they'd have them ready to sell, and maybe no one would turn up and they'd just rot beside the road. Or if someone turns up, they're offering them a quarter of the price they should be because they haven't got a lot of cash, or they're promising to pay them back, and no one ever trusts them to do it. So the fundamental thing that we do with AgUnity is create a phone. There's one of them with a really simple interface that you can give to someone who's never had a phone before in their life. And it does just the things that are relevant to their business today. Don't try to get into anything elaborate like marketplace features. Just, I've got some crop, I want to hand it over, and you're going to pay me later. And we've got a record of that on the phone. It's encrypted, and then it's stored on the blockchain as a separate backup. So it means that the farmers can't, that trust, you've got a solid record keeping system, and so farmers can trust and work together. Once they do that, one of the important things, I feel I have to say it, but I really feel I shouldn't. It's that people in developed markets often think of low-income farmers in developing countries as somehow less intelligent. They're not. There's people in the villages that we work with that'd be doctors or lawyers in another country. They just didn't get opportunity. So when they get that first ability to just work together and you take away that barrier, they can usually solve a lot of other things by themselves. It's just a matter of getting them in a position where they cooperate. And that's really what AgUnity does, improves trust and cooperation. And then over the years, we've evolved the platform so it does a whole lot more than that. So after we get the farmers on the platform, we step them through a whole lot of procedures, like how they can get a bank account, how they can get a loan, how they can insure their crop, how they can order things they normally wouldn't be able to get. And then on the flip side, we can start to trace commodities right from the farmer all the way through to the consumer, like we'll be doing with Fair Trade in our biggest project there.